Oops.
Hello and welcome. We're so glad you're joining us today. We're going to wait just another minute to make sure that everybody has arrived, and then the event will begin. And please make sure you have some note-taking device because we're going to have lots to think about through today's gathering. Thanks again. We'll see you shortly. Well, it's great to have you here. So appreciate your making time to join us. I'm Christopher Minnis, Director of Leadership Giving at the Botanical Garden. And you may know that this event is a part of our Legacy Circle, educational and activities. And we're happy really to look back over 80 years to see how many people have remembered the garden in their will, and all of that has helped to provide the essential support in growing the collection that we know today. Even Helene Stribing, for whom Stribing Arboretum was named, her bequest was the inspiration for starting this beautiful garden. And now here we are enjoying the benefits of her thoughtfulness. Tonight, we're going to hear from two longtime friends of the garden, Jackie DeAnda and Amanda Weitman. Both have a passion for philanthropy and much experience in having private and sometimes challenging and fun conversations with families and individuals as they plan their family's future and what they'll do in passing on their own legacy. Many of the ideas we're going to be talking about are in Susan Turnbull's wonderful book, and you'll have a chance to learn more about that as we go through the evening. And it's my pleasure now to welcome Jackie and Amanda.
Thank you, Christopher.
Thank you. Thanks, Christopher.
Yeah, welcome. I'm Amanda, and thank you for joining us today. We're all encouraged to do our estate planning to make sure the right people get the right things at the right time. The emphasis tends to be on legal soundness and tax efficiency. Those important family values and the why behind your decisions tend to get lost in the shuffle. Today, we want to share why bringing your family values and the why behind your decisions to the surface is so important in helping keeping family harmony and giving your loved ones the opportunity to not just survive, but to thrive. Jackie will share from her perspective why, as a corporate trustee, getting to the why is so important. And I will share my learnings from focusing on the question of how best to prepare the next generation to receive wealth well. Jackie, what has your experience been when you know the why behind someone's planning and when you don't?
Thanks, Amanda, and welcome everyone. Thanks for having us tonight. As a corporate trustee, it's not only important but impactful to know the why behind an individual's wealth transfer plans. Many times I'm reading a trust document, which, if you will, is a blueprint of your family's wealth and family plan. It's your family financial home. All of the instructions regarding the who, the when, and the how are laid out before me. But the why of your values are not conveyed. A well-written value statement helps any trustee understand the why behind your planning, Without a value statement, your trustee is left to interpret your values, your wishes, and your intentions from what is in essence a boilerplate document.
Great, thanks, Jackie. And a couple of years ago, a group of peers, and including Jackie, we asked the question, how do we prepare the next generation to receive wealth well? We decided to form a book club and we read through 11 books. We learned that it's not all about the money, but instead about passing along values, family history, successes, and failures. Here are a couple of ideas that we learned from a few of the books that we read. This is from a book called Beating the Midas Curse. The whole concept of wealth is redefined to include not only money and other financial assets, but also the values, virtues, and ethics that make life meaningful, fulfilling, and ultimately successful. In this values-based planning process, money is still important, but only in its function as a resource to help perpetuate the values that will keep the family strong and prosperous for generations. And from the opposite of spoiled, every conversation about money is also about values. Allowance is also about patience. Giving is about generosity. Work is about perseverance. Negotiating their wants and needs and the difference between the two has a lot to do with thrift and prudence. And from Wealth and Families, the most important assets of your family are its individual members. A governance structure designed to enhance everyone's personal growth and development may preserve your family over the long term. Jackie, have you ever been asked by clients if and when they should share facts about their wealth with their children?
Yes, I'm asked that question very often. The question is typically, when should I have these conversations and how much should I leave to my children? Which are very important. I strongly encourage these conversations, but I also really stress the importance of the why. Why are these families deciding to make these distributions at a certain point and how much they're distributing? It's a perfect time when you start these conversations to begin sharing your values, your wishes, your intentions, and those aspects will go beyond just the financial aspects of your wealth transfer plans.
Yeah, typically when people ask that question about should I share about my wealth, they mean their financial assets. Yeah. But what if we expanded the definition of wealth? The old English term for wealth is weal, which means well-being. If we define wealth in this way, it can include other than financial capital. It can include social capital, intellectual capital, human capital, and spiritual capital. Think about how the Botanical Gardens contributes to one's well-being. The gardens could be considered part of someone's overall family wealth. True wealth can be built on the ideas that are important to us. These values are something that have worth. They have utility and a power and capacity to produce or procure good. It makes sense then that these values should be represented in your estate documents. One day, Jackie and I asked a client if she thought that her living trust fairly represented what was important to her. In other words, could she see herself reflected in her documents? She said, absolutely not, but that her attorney did say that her documents would hold up in court. Legal and tax aspects of planning are important, but we don't want them influencing all of your decisions that will affect your loved ones. They should be overlaid on the decisions that you have made based on what's important to you personally. We are going to do now is take a couple of minutes and identify some of your core values. This list is not exhaustive, so if you are not seeing one of your important values on the list, just add it onto your list. We're going to give you a couple of minutes to identify your top 10 values. So a couple of minutes, I mean like 2. So we'll put a timer on for that, and then you can start your homework. So we'll take about 30 more seconds. Okay, so now that you've seen your top 10, and for some people, it tends to be very easy to pick a top 10, and some people it's hard. They want to choose all of them because they're all good. But now we're going to ask you to narrow it down from your top 10 to your top 5. And this sometimes can be harder. And we'll give you a couple more minutes to do that. Once you have your top 5, you still may be working on that, but once you've selected your top 5, if you would like to put them in the question and answer box to share, please feel free to do so. Got about 30 more seconds. Right, so hopefully you've now got narrowed down to your top 5 core values. So now that we've done that, the question comes up, well, how do we actually include these core values into our estate documents? Jackie, do you have an example of how someone might successfully incorporate one of their values into an estate plan?
I do. I actually have a few. So as donors and patrons of the Botanical Gardens, you might want to convey that 3 values that are important to you are community, responsibility, and generosity. The gardens are clearly a place of community for not only San Francisco residents, but anyone who's visiting the city. And there's an aspect of responsibility of being a patron and a donor in keeping the gardens healthy and well, and for our environment. I think that's also something that someone can incorporate into their letter. Lastly, generosity, the generosity of individuals' time in perhaps volunteering, generosity of money. Those are things that I could see definitely being incorporated into a value statement. You're conveying again that community, generosity, responsibility are values that you are sharing with your loved ones. And hence they understand why the Botanical Gardens are included in your estate planning documents.
So for this group who have already included the Botanical Gardens, that gift could represent those 3 values by leaving a gift, right? Yep. We had a family where work ethic was very, very important to them from generation to generation. And when reviewing their documents, we saw that their children would receive mandatory income from trust when they turned 21. We mentioned that their children would not be out of college yet and likely might not have held a job. And based on the size of their trust, it was likely they wouldn't have to work a day in their life if they didn't want to. The parents realized their estate documents were contrary to their belief in establishing a work ethic. And so they ended up changing their documents to be more in line with their values. Now we're going to practice putting those values into the statement and to see if that statement resonates with you. For me, if I were to put in 3 of my values, it might be if honor, community, and love were flourishing in the world, it would address many of the problems I care about. So you can go ahead and write down that statement. We'll give you, you don't need to share in the Q&A box, but just write that down and see if that resonates with you. So values drive the why behind your decisions in estate planning. But Jackie, in your years of reviewing estate documents as a corporate trustee, do you often see the why included in the documents? And if not, do you have a recommendation on how to capture the why?
So I do not. I mean, I haven't seen many value statements. This is not a document that estate planning attorneys typically discuss when drafting a client's documents. And this is probably because a value statement is not a legally binding document. So it's not something they're going to touch on. So if I were to be speaking with someone, I would say the term education is always in a trust document. It's part of just typical language. So the term education, even though it's often used, it's not clearly defined. So I would say if education is an important value to you, then please define that in your value statement. So for example, does that education mean a 4-year accredited university? Or does it allow your loved one to become perhaps a master gardener?
Okay, great example. So one of the best examples we've seen of a legacy letter or an ethical will is the workbook by Susan Turnbull that you received from the Botanical Gardens. We're gonna walk through, sorry about that, didn't switch the slide, there we go. We're gonna just walk through some highlights of the workbook, but if you are looking to go deeper with some professional guidance, you should just feel free to reach out directly to Susan. So the top 5 steps to creating your legacy letter, you want to identify those you wish to address, consider your intentions for why you're writing it, reflect upon what you want to say, create an outline, and then compose your legacy letter. What I have found is that the legacy letter does not need to be one big document that captures all of your life all at once. It could be to legacy letters to multiple people. And it could be for just moments in time where something important is happening and you want to explain why. So an example, there was a grandmother whose grandson came to her to ask for some money for college, basically for the living expenses for college, as he had gotten a grant to go to the school. And he'd been in and out of different colleges over the years and ended up being quite an accomplished artist and decided he wanted to go back to college to an art school. And so the grandmother was thrilled to be asked, thrilled to give the money, but she explained in a letter why education was so important to her personally, why she was so excited that he had found something that he's passionate about. And I can guarantee you that that letter from the grandmother was equally as important as the check that he received.
So in writing your legacy letter, it's like any project, you take one step at a time. So you begin by identifying who is your audience and ask yourself things such as, who's going to safeguard my letter for me? Will I do that? Will I give that to a loved one? How would I like my letter presented? Do I want it presented individually to beneficiaries, or do I want it to be more public and with everyone listening at the same time? The decision to write one versus many letters. Remember that the letter is like your estate planning documents. It's a living document. It'll change over time. So you can choose to write one letter or several individual letters if they want them more personalized. What's very important is to decide if you're writing the letter with another loved one, a spouse, a partner, the decision needs to be made whether that letter will be written jointly or individually. And what I have found, and Amanda can attest to this, is that many times when we are working with two individuals, one will typically say, oh, we're just going to write one letter. We share the same values. You know, our intentions are the same. So just one letter. The other partner may say, actually, that's not the case. I have very different intentions and a few different values. So I would prefer that we write two separate letters. So in your consideration of writing your legacy letter, consider whether you'd like to do a joint letter, if you'd like to do a joint and perhaps your own letter, or some combination thereof. I think that is what ends up being most impactful in order for your loved ones to really understand your values and your intentions.
Yep, in my experience as well, there's always one spouse who thinks that everything is joint, and there's another spouse who wants to be more individual. It's important to decide, you know, are you going to do it jointly? And maybe some letters are jointly and some are individual. Just up to you.
Mm-hmm.
So step 2, to consider your intention. So basically, why are you writing this legacy letter? Is it to express your love and gratitude to somebody? Is it to tell somebody what's important to you? Is it to share some of your own history, to share things that you've learned, maybe some family history, maybe why you did something in your estate plan, or a gift that you're giving? Sometimes, a lot of times, that philanthropic gift needs a little explanation so people understand why it is they're not receiving money and a nonprofit is. Or to just tell a story behind an asset that will be inherited. In my family, my mom gave to me a loving cup, which looks like this silver trophy with 3 handles, and it's engraved on it to my great-grandfather, who worked for the Orpheum Theater Company in Chicago, and in the early 1900s went out to Los Angeles to see if vaudeville could make it in Los Angeles, and went back to the Orpheum Theater Company and said, absolutely, this is the place to do it. And that was sort of the beginning of Los Angeles becoming the entertainment industry. Well, at one point, W.C. Fields wrote an article about my great-grandfather that said that he put the business into show business. And this loving cup was was an honor given to him from the Orpheum Theater Company. So when I was thinking about, well, who am I going to give this to? I immediately thought of my daughter. My daughter was a business major in college, but now is sort of shifting gears and is getting her associate's degree in theater to become an actor. And so she has that perfect blend of the love of the arts and sort of a head for business. And I thought, this is perfect. So I wrote out a letter, which I have not yet given to her, but it explains the why behind her getting the loving cup versus somebody else. Jackie, do you have an example of this as well?
I do. My father would definitely. Well, actually, I'm going to use the Botanical Gardens. So it's not so much something that I'm giving to my children, but more experiences around the gardens. I mean, we have very happy memories of taking them, my husband and I, taking them there as children and enjoying it, and having play dates there. And recently, my daughter came home from Pennsylvania. She lives in Philadelphia, and she brought her, who I think will be her partner in life, with her. And one of the things that she really wanted to experience with him was the gardens. So again, it doesn't have to be something tangible. It can be an experience. And I think that was very important for her to take him to the Botanical Gardens, walk him through, relive some childhood memories that she had, and share that experience.
Yeah, it help him understand why the gardens were so important to her.
Why the gardens are so important, yes, to her and to our family. So the third part of writing your legacy letter is to be self-reflective. That will just help you be able to express yourself more easily. So think about the intangibles that make your life rich. In the broadest sense of the word, what do you want your loved ones to inherit? And please try not to just focus on the financial assets. I mean, that's really, your trust document's going to do that for you. And what do you really want your audience to hear from you directly? Earlier this evening, we looked at a slide that talked about the various aspects of what is wealth. It touches on feelings, values, perspectives, history. All of those things should be incorporated in as you're reflecting and writing your statement.
Awesome. So the step 4 is sort of outline your legacy letter and sort of prioritize. What do you want to say first? Or if you could only say one thing, what would that be? And what do you want to write about? What could wait till later? And as we were talking about this, if there's a specific value you want to instill in your children and grandchildren, that might be something that you share early. And if it's like a loving cup, something like that, then maybe that's something that could wait till later to explain sort of the why behind that. So now we're going to give you a little more homework. And this is a practice exercise. We'll do a little bit right now, and then the homework for you is to finish this up. So we want you to think of a nonprofit that's doing work that aligns with your values that you identified tonight or that you already knew you had, and is making an impact that you want to see in the world. So we'll take a couple of moments to do that. And then your homework is then to write a short note to this organization that shares the why behind your gift. And the next time that you write them a check or send them, highly appreciated stock or whatever it is that you do to give, then include this note with it and just see what the impact is on that organization. So we'll just give you a couple of minutes to just think of what is the nonprofit and what are the values, your values that align with the values of that organization. We'll just give you a minute at this point. Perfect. And Jackie, I think you had some fun actually with this homework assignment, and you actually wrote something out. Do you want to share that with the group? You're on mute, I think.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, I did have fun, and I actually have a couple of things. One, professionally, I do work with a lot of multi-generational native San Francisco families. And what I find with the older generations is that through their storytelling their verbal storytelling of their youth, they are able to share their memories of things like the botanical gardens. And it's a great way for them to share their feelings, their values, and history, which will in turn help their beneficiaries understand why the gardens are included in their estate plan. So what I encourage is for them to actually take those kind of verbal, auditory history conversations with family and put it into a value statement. And then secondly, when I was doing this, I've gone through this before with Amanda, and when we were preparing to do it for the gardens, it really brought home a lot of very good memories about the values my own parents have instilled in me. So, integrity, empathy, more specifically with my mother, environment and beauty. She was a migrant farm worker, and she chose to look at, her place of work and appreciate the nature around her. And so when she would come visit, she loved going to the gardens. We would take the kids. They would get to see her joy and excitement over it. And that is something that when I write my letter to my kids, I will definitely include and say, you know, what's important to us is that you appreciate the environment around you, the beauty of it, you carry it forward with you, and you know, enjoy it in every way that you can.
Great, thank you so much.
Mhm.
And that is all we have for now. Christopher, I'm going to turn it back to you.
I really appreciate you saying that, Jackie, because one of the privileges I have on a regular basis is to hear from our donors why they love the garden so much and the stories that, like your family, led them here and that they want to continue. And I really feel a sense of unselfishness as people say, I'd like the others in the community to enjoy this or other future generations. So it's a great privilege to be at the garden. We recently had a wonderful return of flower piano where all the pianos are spread around in various places, and to see the community just loving together and playing music together was just something you don't often experience in the city that's all spread out and everyone's sort of in their own little world. So this is, for me, a place that brings us all together.
So I did notice, Christopher, the couple
Yes.
of people did put in what their values were. So one person had faith, compassion, justice, loyalty, and love. And another person had love, beauty, responsibility, wisdom, and peace. Those are lovely.
They are lovely. And just touching on what you said, Christopher, it's true. And the pianos in the garden are just beautiful. And you do feel that very strong sense of community, you know, which we all need at this point.
I think after feeling so separate for almost 2 years, just the wonder of coming together and sharing an experience, music particularly, it was great.
Okay.
I'd like to invite anybody who has a question to just share it in the Q&A, and I can bring that to Amanda and Jackie. And now I realize I have several homework assignments. First, to review my values, or so many great ones to choose from, and also how do you frame that into a story, like you were saying that your mother shared about her growing up, and now you have a story to share with your family.
Yes. Yeah.
I want everyone to know that we've had the privilege of being able to record this at Jackie and Amanda's permission, so that it's something you want to share with your friends and family, please let me know, and I'll send you the link to this recording so you can review it yourselves or share it with others, because this is a very deep way of looking at thoughts rather than things that we're passing along, and intentions rather than stuff.
So Christopher, while we're waiting for some questions, I have a question for you. As a director of development for the gardens, if somebody sent along a letter of why they gave along with a check, what would that mean to you?
Well, it's such a great privilege to sort of hear. I had a meeting recently with a couple who are planning to make a gift to the garden through their estate plan. And when I learned about their love of education, love of children, it became instantly clear where their gift could best be used. So it's so helpful. I love to know not exactly what is coming, that doesn't matter, but the intention of a gift is so helpful, because then when the time comes, we know exactly how to redeploy that generosity throughout our children's programs or our outreach, the collections. Everybody seems to have a specific thing that they're interested in, and it's wonderful to see how all those contributions add up to a more beautiful place.
That's lovely. And it's exactly right. When you hear the intention behind the gift, it just is so much more impactful.
Jackie, is this a part of every conversation that you have with your clients?
It is not. It really does depend. I mean, I think, frankly, generationally, with younger individuals, or they're much more open to being communicative and sharing things. And they don't want the feeling of their beneficiaries feeling like a meteor is coming at them, that they don't have no idea what's really, what kind of wealth will be coming to them. It helps them, really helps their beneficiaries plan their own lives. And I think that's very important. And I think a lot of people really do worry about, how much is too much? I don't want to spoil my kids. Those are very common concerns. It's not anyone individually who's experiencing that alone. But I have found professionally that the more the conversations are had at the right time, they are much more impactful.
And it's interesting as well. The Lilly Family School at Indiana University, so the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy, just put out their 2020 giving report. And one of the data points was that the two most challenging issues for donors is figuring out where to give. So there's sort of the why again, like understanding why do I want to give, and then identifying different areas, and then identifying organizations within those areas, and how much to give. And there are philanthropic advisors, available to get to the kind of where to give. And then your financial advisor can walk you through how much to give. They've got all the analytics to be able to determine, how much you could give during life and how much you could give when you pass away. And I know that many people feel like they wish they could give more during their lifetime and they don't think they can. But then they do this analytical work and they're like, wow, I had no idea that I could actually give that. That makes me so happy that I could do that now and watch the gift at work.
I had one conversation recently with a donor who would love to have a bench, but it's beyond her capacity at this time, just to make sure she has enough for living expenses. So the agreement that we made was she would write out the kind of words that she'd like to have on her plaque. And she described the part of the gardens that meant the most to her. It was sort of private, quiet corners, so that when the time comes, she's given us a letter of intention that tells us that when the time comes from her estate gift, we're going to know exactly how she would like to be remembered, and her friends will have a place to sit and enjoy the garden in thinking of her. So it was so great to know in advance what her desire was, and she's very satisfied. And we get to thank her now.
Yes, yeah, that's true.
Jackie, it looks like there was a question in the Q&A that probably you could answer, not necessarily from a legal perspective, but maybe just from your experience, which is, what is the difference between a will, a living will, and a living trust?
So I'm not an attorney, so this is definitely not legal advice. A will is really a document that is alongside your trust document to convey things such as who, if you have small children, you're going to appoint who the guardians are. If unfortunately something happens to you while they're minor children, that's probably the biggest, most important part of a will. The second thing about a will is that there's language in it that says, if I didn't title all of my assets properly into a trust, then the assets that would have gone through probate under the will, those will pour over into my trust. So it's a pour over will provisions that are included. A living trust is really a revocable trust document. It's your trust. It's with all of your intentions of where it goes, where your assets go, when it goes, in what manner, but it's not something that protects you from creditors. It's really, if you will, a wrapper for your assets, so that once you pass, there's a direction of where your assets will go, and it gives you a lot more, if you will, control over those assets. And then, I'm sorry, Amanda, what was the third?
What a living will is.
A living will, I think sometimes someone thinks of a value statement or a legacy letter as a living will. So that's my impression of it. I don't know if that's standard, but that's much more of a personal side letter, if you will, sharing with your trustee or your loved ones all the things that we've been talking about tonight.
Good. The living trust, assets that are in a living trust would not go through probate in the state that you live in, correct? And if you have just a will and not a living trust, then the state that you live in will determine where those assets go. They have a
That's
plan
true.
for you. If you don't put a plan together in a living trust, they've got a plan for you, and you may or may not like it.
And it's very public, unfortunately. Your net worth, your beneficiaries, how much they're receiving, that's all very public. Whereas a trust will keep all that information private.
Good. So hopefully that answers the question for the questioner.
I noticed that we've been joined tonight by Susan Turnbull, so I want to give a special shout out to Susan for your wonderful book.
Yes, it really is an excellent workbook. It's just, it really guides an individual through what is an exciting and yet kind of daunting exercise. And so I very much appreciate it. I think it's wonderful that you provided copies to the individuals who have joined us today.
Yeah, I had a client the other day who was thinking about doing a legacy trust, which is just one that goes on for multiple generations. And he said, Amanda, I'm leaving money to people I don't even know. And I said, and on the flip side, there are people that don't know you who are going to receive your money. And I said, so what you might want to do is start writing things down so that they do know something about you, what was important, how you created the wealth, how wealth to you was far more, bigger than just money. And I said, I have this great workbook. He's like, send it. So that popped in the mail to him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie and Amanda, for the time you've given us today. And as I mentioned, this is being recorded, so it can be shared with friends and viewed again. I think especially around the exercises, I'd like to have a little more time.
Yep, they're very thought-provoking.
Thank you so much for inviting us, Christopher. This has been great.
Thanks for including us.
Okay, have a great evening.
Thank you. You too. Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.